Hi guys, and welcome to Bradio Software Development. My name is Brad, and today we're going to be talking about installing Linkerd onto our DigitalOcean Kubernetes cluster. Now, in the last episode we installed Istio, but after watching the video I realised that Istio is actually quite complicated, especially if you're a beginner, so I wanted to give people an alternative way of building a service mesh. It's a lot easier to set up Linkerd, so this video should be very short, but bear with me. What we can do is we can undo the previous cluster that we had, or you can start up a new cluster, or you can just carry on and skip over this video and go into the next episode that should be releasing in a couple of days. So this video is completely optional. If you don't fancy setting up Istio, you can install Linkerd instead, which is far easier. So without further ado, let's get straight into the terminals. So in the last episode we set up Istio in our Kubernetes cluster, but I realised that Istio is actually quite complex and Linkerd is a lot easier to set up. It's a much simpler service mesh and a lot easier to install. So the first thing I would like you to do is go over to GitHub. I will put the link in the description, and you'll come to this skeleton KH repo that I've created. If you head over to releases, you can see Kubernetes Part C Linkerd on DigitalOcean, and we've got version 0.1.0. Now, if we go back over to code, we can see if we click on the master dropdown, I've put all of the releases into their own branches. So if we go ahead and click release v010, this will give you all of the updates that I've made for this episode. So this will be the latest branch for this episode. If you're coming into this video fresh and you would like to start from scratch, what you can do is you can click on code and click on this little copy button here, go back to your terminal, and then go to a place where you would like to install the repo and do git clone. As you can see, this has failed because I already have it, so it will not create a second one. Although what I can do is if I do git clone and the SSH paste that I copied from before and I call it 123, you can see that it's now going to clone into a folder called 123. But we don't need to do that because we've already come from the last episode. So you should be on release v0.1.0 for this episode. Okay, so if we come over here and take a look at Linkerd, we can see that it's a different kind of service mesh. It is different, they are right about that, but it is also far easier to set up than Istio. So if we go over to the docs and we click on getting started, the first thing we need to do is actually install the CLI for Linkerd. So if you look at the first command here, it's actually telling you to curl a URL and then run it as an sh script, but we're using a Mac, so if you scroll down here to brew, you can see that we have brew install Linkerd. So I've already installed mine, but if you go ahead and type brew install Linkerd, it will install it. In my case, it will just update homebrew. And as you can see here, we now have to validate our Kubernetes cluster. Now, if you came from the last episode, you should already have a cluster available for you. So we won't have to do much in terms of configuration. If you're coming over fresh, if you head over to the DigitalOcean control panel and click on Kubernetes on the left, you can actually spin up a brand new Kubernetes cluster. We're actually going to do that for this episode because I deleted the previous one from the previous episode, so I would like to start it all over again. Also, it does kind of make sense to do this even if you come from the last episode, as we have uninstalled Istio and we're now using Linkerd. So if you want to go ahead and delete your old cluster and just spin it up again, we'll go through the process of adding all of the YAML files to the new cluster. So we're going to select one node and we're going to make sure it's $10 per month. So if we add our tag, which is RadioSD, and we'll keep it with just that name for now, and we'll create a cluster. Okay, so it looks like our Kubernetes cluster has finished installing. So in the same steps as the last video, if we go to download the config file and we click copy on the recommended step, go to our terminal, and if we paste that in, it will now set our context to the new cluster, and we should be able to do a kubectl get pods to make sure it's working. And as you can see, we have all these kube system pods that are being started up. So it's not quite finished yet, but we're almost there. So while it's finishing off the last minute steps, if we go back to our terminal, so we open up the test API service. So I've tried to put everything related to the test API in its own subfolder. So we click on config map, we have a bunch of nothing, because there's nothing there at the minute. And if we go to deployments, we've got a lot of stuff here, which I'm not going to bother going into because it's quite complicated. But the main things to watch out for are the ports. So we've got port 8080 on the internal for the readiness and the liveliness probe. And we've also got the container port, which is 8080. And then we've also referencing our config map. And if we look at the top, you can see here that we have an annotation for Linkerd. So here, this is how Linkerd picks up on the sidecar that this deployment needs to be listened to. So it essentially attaches this deployment to the service mesh. So now that we've gone over some of the extra changes to our configuration YML files, if you go back to your browser and go back to the Linkerd getting started page, we can install Linkerd onto the cluster. The first thing we need to do is validate that our Kubernetes cluster is ready to install Linkerd. So you copy that first command on step 2 and paste it into here. Remember, we set our context in the previous step. And what this will do, it will just do a preliminary check to make sure that we can actually install what we need to. So it looks like everything's okay. So we scroll down to step 3 and copy this command here, linkerd install kubectl apply -f-. Now what this will do behind the scenes, if you paste this into your terminal, what this will do is it will get the install script from Linkerd and then it will apply the file directly to our Kubernetes cluster. Okay, and now the next step is to do a check to make sure that everything's installed correctly. So we do Linkerd check. So after that, it should take quite a while, but you'll see that the status check results are tick, which means it's okay. So if we type in Linkerd dashboard, what this will do is it will create a local host port mapping to the Kubernetes cluster so we can access our Linkerd dashboard and Grafana dashboard. So if we click on enter, it should spin up our web browser. There we go. So this is all of our Kubernetes pods, deployments, jobs, replica sets, everything. If we go to control pane, we can see that everything looks like it's okay and it's running, which is good. And if we go to namespaces, we can see that nothing's meshed yet. And the reason nothing's meshed is because we haven't got no pods worth meshing. So in order to fix this, what we need to do is apply all of our config files to the Kubernetes cluster. So if we look here at c_create.sh, this is the one we need. And you can see that it creates all of the namespaces for the APIs and the apps. It does the Linkerd install, which we've already done. So what we want to do is actually run this file. So we can't run it from the root of the directory. We have to cd into scripts. So go back to terminal, do cd scripts, and then type in ./c_create.sh. There we go. We can see that our ingress namespace has been created, and so is our service for the ingress. So now if we go back to Linkerd on our browser, we should see a bunch more stuff opening up. And you can see here that on our APIs, our test API is meshed, which is good. It means that Linkerd has been successfully sidecarred onto all of our test API pods and deployments. So if we actually click on this icon on the right hand side, we can open up Grafana, and it will show us all of the requests that are coming into the pod from the outside world. So this here on this request rate is actually just probably the readiness probe or the health check. And then you have the latency and the success rate, which is quite handy. It does tell you since the dawn of time, since the pod gets created, the exact history of it, which is pretty cool. The only thing that Linkerd doesn't have is Kiali. Now, I do actually like Kiali because it's quite cool to see the visual representation of all the pods connecting together. But at the minute, Linkerd does not support Kiali, but it's a good price to pay because Linkerd is so much easier to set up than Istio. It's so much easier, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to set up none of the add-ons or anything. Linkerd just has it all included, like Prometheus. Okay, so that's my tutorial video on installing Linkerd. I hope it helped you, and I hope that, you know, if you got stuck along the way, then you can ask us in the comments if something's not quite right. You may have noticed as well that between terminal runs that I actually commented things out, and that's because a lot of the stuff that I was doing that I thought I tested didn't work because I'd never done it from a fresh install. But I will fix all of those in the GitHub repo, so when you pull down the branch from version 0.1.0, then it will automatically be there, so you won't get any of those problems that I had. So thanks for watching, and remember to like, comment and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video where we'll be talking about how to set up load balancers on your domain names. See you later.
Emphatic beat addict in a stab hit. I envelope the game, call me Rabbit. Hop to hop, I run the internet equivocally. Bitch, I be hit 'em with the bite style symmetry. Digital gangster reppin' till I'm dead. Steady grip Apache logs when I'm looking for the feds. Fast forward, now the internet anonymous and captains of the lows.